my name's Nathan. This is my basement machine shop. I'm owner and operator at GOMachining, and I would like to give you a shop tour, kind of show you some of the equipment I have. I believe I have some interesting, unique equipment that I think you guys would like to see, and I'm going to start my tour here at the workbench. Now, every shop kind of needs a good workbench to do layout work, and as you can see, I have an arbor press here for doing different assemblies. This is a bench center for measuring concentricity. Most of the work I do is clocks and more decorative parts out of brass. As you can see, here's a skeleton clock that I've started as a project, and you'll probably see more of this in future videos. Here's a couple of tops that I've worked on and made. A lot of different turning operations on these, and an optical comparator. And yeah, I just in this video I just want to show you guys some of the stuff I have, and talk about some maybe future projects, and just show you how these things work. Continuing on with our tour, this here is my Handy shaper. It's good for doing a lot of internal work as well as flattening stuff out. This is the biggest machine that I have down in my shop. I don't use it for a lot of stuff, but it can do some really good work and some odd stuff that I wouldn't be able to do with other equipment. Moving over here, I have a Hawk scroll saw. I use these for cutting out clock frames and crossing out wheels and clock gears and things like that. It's a very versatile machine. As you can see, I have a magnifying lamp for doing a lot of accurate work. I'd like to show you these machines as we move forward. If you look over here, this is my jet turret lathe. It's good for doing internal hole operations, and as you can see, it's got a 6-station turret as well as 2 cross tools. These machines are kind of used more in the past, but it'll be neat to show you guys the capabilities these machines have, and we can do a lot of good work with them. Moving over here, this is a really old machine. It's probably 100 years old or so, and this is a gear hobber used for cutting the outside of gear blanks. In fact, over here you can see this is a gear that I cut off of it. It cut the outside teeth profile, and I'll show you some more of those in the future. This is a power hacksaw that I use for doing most of my rough cuts and things. I like using it because I can replace the blade for a lot cheaper than you would a conventional horizontal bandsaw. I've had this one. It's probably one of my oldest machines I got and restored, and it's done a lot of good work for me. Still very tight and works really well. This is a chucker. It's another kind of production style machine. I have a fair amount of older production style equipment. I just find that it helps get you there so much faster with parts. The way this one operates is you load it up with a bunch of different cutters. Some could be drills, some could be boring tools, or inside diameter, outside diameter turning tools. And you put them on this table, and then it can rotate to the different selected tools, and then you can adjust the stop to determine depth and all that, so you can make a lot of more complicated parts than you could on the turret lathe. And it's made by Harding, which is a really good brand, and operates very smooth and works well, and it'll be fun to show you what this thing can do. Moving over here, this is my most versatile milling machine. It's a hardage milling machine. It's kind of on the smaller side, probably about half the size of what maybe a Bridgeport is. It can still cut in steel, but it works really good for accurate small parts. I've mounted a Bridgeport head on it, so it'll do horizontal and vertical work. It has a power feed table going in X, and I do it for a lot of, there's a lot of good operations I can do on this machine, and it does a lot of good tool work for me. This is one of my oldest machines. It's a Van Norman vertical milling machine. What I liked about this machine is you can rotate the head and get some really accurate angles, and you can actually flip it all the way over so you can run it in vertical as well. It is a power feed table, and it has a patent date on it of 1896. But as you can see, someone mounted a motor on it. This probably would have been ran with a line shaft or something. The spindle on this is actually a plain bearing. It doesn't use ball bearings, so it spins rather slow. So I do it for most of my steel. Jig board machine built by Langley. It's kind of a smaller one. Most jig boards you see are probably a lot bigger than this. These are kind of unique machines, and they're not really used that much anymore because of CNCs that came out and stuff like that. But this is designed and made for making very accurate holes, generally boring operations. I think it works great for doing lantern pinions and clocks and boring. I bored a few accurate holes. You can do connecting rods on it and things like that. As you can see, it's a little different in that the head operates with this crank instead of a conventional quill like you'd see on a Bridgeport. So you can have very smooth operations going down. And actually each hand wheel is incremented in tenths. So this will actually cut tenths, a tenth of a thousandth of an inch. Very accurate, versatile machine. Over here, this is one of my CNC machines. I actually built this one. It has ball screws and all 2 axis. I generally use this for doing more accurate turning operations and things like that, like clock pillars. It's a very versatile, good machine. It's worked really well for me. This is one of the parts that I made off of it. This is actually for one of the clocks that you saw over on the bench, one of the pillars. I did the inner turning with it, and what's nice about a CNC is it's fast and you don't have to make special form tools for making the different radiuses and things like that. So this is one of my CNCs. I'd like to go through showing how to do some programming with this and setting it up to do some good turning operations. This machine over here is actually designed for doing watch gears. It has an indexer on it and the spindle here that would have your cutter. It's a fully automatic, so you put your part in it, and I've actually seen some of these that'll have a magazine and it'll continue to load blanks. This would be designed for doing maybe a less skilled laborer to operate and do a more skilled task like cutting teeth and gears. It's neat that it operates off of a bunch of different cams and levers. I had them actually make these 2 wheels to advance it, and you have to make the wheel that has the right amount of notches to cut however many gear teeth you need. Kind of neat old-fashioned machine for how they used to cut watch gears. It'll only do small work, and I haven't really found much stuff to use it for, but it's a kind of a neat machine, and I had to pick it up when I could. Over here we have one of my engine lathes. This is a 10-inch Logan lathe. It'll do screw cutting. And then over here, kind of out of shot, is a lathe that I restored a while back, and it's an old Barnes. It's a 13-inch, but it actually has stands in it that'll lift the tailstock and headstock, and you can move it up to about 18 inches. So this is the biggest lathe I have. I actually liked it because it's kind of light enough to go into a basement, yet it'll probably turn a piece about 8 feet long. So it's a very long machine, and I have the gear changes for it, so you can cut different threads on it. Might be perfect for doing gunsmithing operations and stuff like that. But again, it's got the oilers for because it has plain bearings in it, and haven't done a lot of work with it, but the work I have done on it, it's actually pretty accurate and works pretty well. Thank you. This is a Pratt & Whitney. This is what they call a dead bed, which is a little bit different than an engine lathe in that your cross slide actually can be adjusted and moved back and forth, and you kind of put it in position, and then you move your different dials for your X and Z travel. I believe this is like a 7-inch, and a lot of watchmaker lathes and instrument lathes are operated this way, and it's a nice lathe for doing quick setups and different operations that way. It doesn't take much to get going, and I actually hooked it up with a VFD so you can control your speed from slow RPM up to high RPM, and very nice little machine. This is one of my older machines, one of my oldest machines I've gotten, one of the first ever stored. So cuts very well and works really well. There's actually 3 mills here. There's one kind of hiding back here. These are all very similar, so I can talk about all of them at once real quick. These are all horizontal. These are more your production style horizontal machines. As you can see, it doesn't have conventional dials. This one does in Z, but actually in X, it uses a rack and pinion, so you're able to do very fast slotting operations and things like that. This one I use a lot for cutting gears. This one over here is actually the same as that, except for it's a smaller version, so same kind of idea, that fast movement. And then this one over here, the head actually moves up and down instead of in your Z axis. So you have dials on your in your Z and X, and then in your Y you have a lever to move up and down fast. The guy I got this from said they used to use it for cutting gear keyways and shafts with gears, and it worked good because you could just drive into it. I use it for doing clock escapement wheels, where you're cutting teeth actually on the to a right angle, which you normally would on a gear. And I'll show you that in future videos. And yeah, it'd be neat to show you how these machines work and the kind of work. Thing into another room. These are my 2 CNC machines I have, very similar. I have a CNC router, and then I have a CNC milling machine. They both operate well and work well for doing more complex milling operations and things like that. It'll be fun to show you how to do some programming on these and their capabilities. Like I said, moving into a different room, a lot of my grinding equipment is in this room. That kind of separates the dust and things like that that's created. Here's my OD grinder. I actually just made an attachment for it, so it'll actually do ID work as well. It actually was a piston cutter grinder, but I use it mostly for outer diameter work and stuff like that. It's been good for grinding in shafts and things like that, very accurate. That shaft that was out on the bench center I had out in the first part of this video was actually ground on this, and I think it got within a couple tenths of run out. Good machine, works well for me, plenty accurate for the kind of stuff that I do. Moving over here, this is a decal, actually a very old version of, you may have seen some newer ones in different tool shops and stuff like that. This machine is used for grinding in cutters. You can sharpen end mills with it or sharpen drill bits. I use it mostly for making boring bars out of carbide. That's why it has a diamond wheel on it. Very nice little machine. I actually had to retrofit the collets on it because the collets are extremely hard to make, and I only had about 1 or 2, so I had to rebuild this spindle in here so that I could get a more conventional R8 collet in it. This one over here, this is actually a rod hone. I picked it up because I got it for a good price, and I haven't really found a use for it yet, but what it's made for is to hone in holes in a connecting rod, but you could use it to hone a variety of different holes and things, but it's to make very high surface finish, very accurate. If you look up here, this might be a little hard to see because it's a little ways away, but this is a wrist pin. So what they must have been using it for is honing in pistons and then matching it to the wrist pin. So this would be if you were going to maybe oversize a piston wrist pin so that you could reuse a old worn out piston. The dial up here adjusts how big your hole is, and then you just kind of a feel of moving your part back and forth. This is a pantograph. It's used for doing engraving. It has a diamond in it, but you can actually put a router head in it. What it does is this follows your pattern, and then it moves across, and it'll duplicate this design onto something else, but this could be letters or numbers or anything like that. I use it for doing clock dials and numbers and things like that. I've used it to engrave knives as well. Very versatile, nice little machine for doing engraving work. And then I built this indexer for it, which allows me to index different things on a circular pattern. All right, over here, this is a valve grinding machine. It's used for resurfacing engine valves and things of that nature. I use it mostly for putting chamfers on things. I picked this up to do a lot of that kind of work. I haven't used it a lot, but for certain applications like that, it works good, and it would be fun to rebuild maybe an engine with it sometime. Maybe we'll even get into doing some of that kind of stuff. Out in my garage, I actually have an old boring machine that they used in Model Ts to recut cylinders and stuff, so maybe one day I'll be able to find a project that we could do that. And then my surface grinder over here. This is a little bit more conventional grinding machine that you'd see in a die shop or something like that. It has a compound table on it to cut 2 different angles. It works really well, and I've got a fair amount of attachments for it, so I can make a decent amount of cutting tools and stuff like that. Good machine. It's worked really well for me. What's nice about these is you can not only grind hardened materials and stuff like that for, say, a lot of clock pivots are hardened, but you can also make custom lathe bits or milling bits to be able to cut different profiles and stuff. So very good machine. This is a die filer. It's basically just a file that moves up and down and allows you to cut very, very accurate and really move into scribed lines. This would have been something they'd use in die shops before CNC came along to do different profiles and finish different corners and edges and get sharp corners. So I'll show you that in future videos too. thanks for coming along with me on my shop tour. If you heard some noises in the back, that's my dog. He was kind of playing with his toy a little bit while we were filming this video. On future, I'd like to maybe every other Tuesday put out a video on operating some of this equipment. It'll probably be based mostly towards gear cutting and clock making, but we might throw some other projects in, and maybe you guys can give me some ideas on some stuff that you'd like to see as you get to know more and more of what I have in my shop and what the capabilities are. Thanks again for tuning in. If you like my videos, please like and subscribe. I plan on putting out a video every other Wednesday related to machining. Please give me any suggestions or anything like that on some of the machines you'd like to see, and maybe some operations you'd like. Thanks for tuning in.